Morning, Pat.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning. We're just waiting for the live stream to come online. I'll just ask if everybody doesn't mind just putting themselves on mute in the meantime, and we'll keep it nice and clean.
So it's Ryan here with Communications. We're now live streaming on YouTube, and you're all set to start your meeting.
Okay, thanks, Ryan.
No problem.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Economic Recovery Task Force agenda meeting for Tuesday, September 1st. Obviously electronic. Thanks for joining us. I'll call the meeting to order. I'll ask for a motion for the adoption of the agenda, please. Councillor Seymour Fagan, Councillor O'Reilly, anyone object? That's passed. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest on anything on today's agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion for the adoption of the minutes from the August 11th Economic Recovery Task Force? Jill, thank you. Seconded by Tom. Is there any questions or comments or corrections on the minutes? They look pretty good to me. I was going to say the only thing, not a big deal, but I know we switched 5.1 prospects for growth and 5.2. We did Rebecca's presentation first, so not a big deal. They're both in there, but we switched that around, so the minutes should probably reflect that. So anyone object to the approval of the minutes? Consider that passed. We'll jump right into new business. We're not going to focus today too much on the infrastructure stimulus. We have an agenda. We have a memo going forward to committee of the whole this afternoon with the recommendations from the last about the downtown infrastructure being a top priority. I want to jump right into development approvals, the focus area number 2. I want to spend some time on 9.1, which is the round table discussion on past presentations and some future direction. But in the meantime, 8.1, if I can get a development working group update from Bjorn Alfredson. Bjorn's with us. Welcome, Bjorn, if you don't mind.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me?
We can, yeah.
Yep, good. Well, I think we're actually making some progress. I'm a little sad by the pace. I would have hoped we would be farther along by now, but I'm trying to focus on the fact that I like what I'm seeing at this point. We have a spreadsheet with all the applications in planning that was made by Anna, I guess, from the planning department. Thank you to her and to everybody else in planning for putting it together. It's not totally complete, but it provides an overview of all applications by type of application and their current status. The idea is that should be a starting point for helping to prioritize the work in the planning department and perhaps also make it more efficient. The other piece of that puzzle is that it can also be the starting point for moving customer service out of the planning department and let planners spend more time on planning. And I know both Richard and Rebecca have spent a little bit of time looking over this sheet, and I'm thinking maybe it would be better if one of those two would say a few words as to where we are and what they think they can do with it. Would any one of you guys want to go for a bit? Or
Richard, you want to jump in on that as the manager of planning? Just want to make sure we're all on the same page. I know Bjorn's been pushing pretty hard for the spreadsheet, and I think this task force has been very supportive of that, along with the concierge. And got to get my accent right. And I just want to make sure that, that the planning department is looking at it, hopefully in a positive light, that we're trying to help. We're trying to take some of that. So I don't want it to seem like we're looking to keep an eye on planners and what they do and account for every minute or anything. But hopefully your group is on board with the direction we're trying to go as a task force to help. So I'm just wondering if you can comment on that.
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. So yeah, so thanks everyone. We've been working. Anna Kalnina has put the spreadsheet together. So it's broken up into 5 different tabs. So we've got sort of the larger applications in OPA and ZBA. Then there's site plans, subdivision, condo, consent, and minor variance. So we're sort of playing with some of the milestones, and we're sort of looking at some of those, but by and large, what the spreadsheet does is it has a lot of general information on the application, sort of location, related files, description, what it does. So, and various different milestones. So when it was received, deemed complete, circulation dates, things like that. So there's a couple things with the spreadsheet. So what it's going to really do is it's going to help us to if we have to pull together active applications, we'll be able to do that. Plus once it's all sort of up to date and everything, all the applications are in. If the planner isn't here, somebody else will be able to sort of provide an update. So if anybody calls in, we'll be able to provide some general information. So from a customer service perspective, that's really good. We've heard it time and time again. Someone's off for 2 weeks, like to get a status update. It's hard for someone else to jump into the file. So this will allow us to do that. So that it's really good, and it's going to allow us to sort of also sort of work on scheduling probably a bit better, and sort of look at the different files and sort of see where they're at, and if something is, and if maybe there needs to be a little bit of a push to the applicant or something like that, that's going to be able to help us do that. We've had a lot of internal discussions in our department, and all of our planners are on board with it. I think they don't see it as anybody watching them. They see this as helpful, and they will be updating it as they need to. We're sort of having some discussions about having it when new applications come in, who's going to be putting that information in. So I think we'll have the admins do that, but I think overall we're very excited and very happy with the chart. I think it'll really help us from a customer service perspective. We've had a lot of discussions in the last few weeks, sort of internally, sort of Chris and I and Rebecca and some of the supervisors about the idea of the concierge service. So what we're going to do is we're going to sort of start it off more in the site plan realm first to sort of see how it works. So what we'll do is when an application comes in, that's sort of a larger application or a priority application, we'll assign Emily Turner to be the concierge at this point in time. And her contact information will also go out to the applicant. So they will have Emily's contact information as sort of a backup. And if they need some help or anything like that, they can Emily will be sort of the first call that they make. So that's sort of where we have gone on that. I think we do want to dive a bit deeper into some of the other larger applications. So larger OPAs, ZBAs, if there's large priority applications that from an economic development perspective are very key. We're going to sort of look at those next, but we thought we would sort of start off with the site plans, because from our perspective, that's when the planning rubber hits the road. That's sort of the last major application before we sort of get into the building permit phase. And I think it would be helpful to have Emily sort of be a concierge to sort of reach out to the developers if there's a bit of a holdup or if there's a bit of a delay, and sort of just sort of feel it out and sort of say, hey, our comments went out, 2 months ago. Is there anything? How's it coming along with you? How are things going? And then sort of report back to us and sort of see if there's anything that's needed. I think it's also good for Emily to sort of reach out and sort of develop that rapport with the development community, and sort of help liaise and maybe help to guide things, or maybe offer other solutions. There could be some other programming that the developer may not be aware of. So I think this is definitely going to be a positive step for us, and hopefully for the development community as well. So that's where that process stands for now. If anybody has any questions, Rebecca and I can certainly answer them.
So Richard, just first, thanks for that. And thanks Bjorn for putting that together. But do you, regarding the spreadsheet, do you, as the manager of planning, do you see that as a good tool for you to sort of be able to skim through every once in a while, just to sort of see where applications are going, which ones have maybe stalled? I mean, do you see that as a valuable tool from a manager's perspective, where you get a little bit of a bird's eye view on, you probably already do, but it gives you a little bit of a summary that you can go to anytime to just see where things are sort of at and what's moving and what's not?
Actually, I've already been using it for minor variances and consents quite heavily, because we get, right now, that's a pinch point for us because of the backlog. So I've already been using it for that, and it's been great to sort of see where the different applications are at, and, you know, sort of seeing perhaps things can switch, or we can add another one onto an agenda. So it's already been really helpful for that, but it'll also be helpful for the larger applications to sort of see where they're at in the process. So it's already helped a lot already.
Awesome, thanks. Rebecca, I'll just ask you real quick if I can. Emily Turner, Emily's great. I think she'll do a good job. We have a business development officer. Would that not be a better, or am I remembering on maternity leave or off on leave or something? Can you just update us on why that officer is not being involved in the process?
Yes, typically that's Lindsay. She's on maternity leave at the moment, and that position is not being backfilled for some internal reasons. And so in the meantime, Emily is well versed in the planning piece. So our role really is to help these businesses get their developments across the line. So we see some help see this investment.
Do you have anything you want to add to Richard or Bjorn's comments on the process?
Only to say that I'm hoping as we're working together, we'll see more developments come to fruition, and hopefully the timelines in these applications between when they start and when they finish start to shorten with the extra effort and teamwork in that period.
Okay. No, I think it's great. Juan, you got a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I might have missed it, but was that Richard, was that spreadsheet you were talking about, was that circulated to everyone? Or can you, like, did we see that priority spreadsheet?
So it's not really a priority spreadsheet in that sense. It's a spreadsheet sort of showing all of our active applications at this point in time. So it doesn't really have priority applications. It has all the applications. It's not just priority applications from that perspective.
So we have a list of all the applications, which is great. You mentioned then you assign ones that are higher profile. How do you determine which ones are higher profile than others?
No, I didn't say I assign them. I mean, we'll be looking at them to sort of see if they're larger projects, or if they align with some of the economic development, main economic development business areas. So tourism, agriculture, industry, things like that. But, you know, obviously, if we have an 8-story residential building, obviously that's a priority development from our perspective. It's going to lead to some pretty substantial development, housing opportunities, growth, employment. So we'll be looking at those and seeing if the concierge can be involved in those as well.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to understand. So there's a matrix or a criteria that says if a development meets these points or these categories, then it gets priority, higher profile, wherever you want to call it. But is there a matrix, a decision-making process that says if development does this or does that, 8 stories, higher density, then it's allocated point or a scoring system that then staff can easily say this is priority? Or is it subjective? Is it at the manager's discretion?
We don't have any kind of a scoring system for that. Obviously, I think I think it's discretionary at this point in time. Obviously, if it's a large scale development, for example, iBrands or Craft, that has priority. So I don't really think we need to put a scoring system in place at this time. If that does prove to be needed or necessary, we'll take a look at it in the future.
Okay, fair enough. So it's at the so is at the manager's discretion would be yourself and Chris would then
It's
prioritize it.
Yeah, it's Sherry, myself, and Chris. So
Thank you.
I'd like to interject too, and just say that I think that having this spreadsheet with an overview of all applications, there will be some very obvious subconscious prioritization by the department. The planners easily know which is which. But the other important thing with having a spreadsheet like this that should be open and available, I think, to councillors and economic development, is that you can, if you want to, create a more formal prioritization. You can look at it from time to time, have a meeting between councillors, directors, managers, and say, hey, here's what we're looking at. What are their priorities? Like it just gives the elected councillors a better chance to see what's going on, in my opinion. That was my thinking behind it, that having it will create the opportunity for everybody to have an opinion.
And I agree with that, Bjorn. I think even having Emily from an economic development perspective, being a part of that discussion too, she'll have an eye for obviously knowing what from an economic development perspective sort of warrants a little bit extra attention as well. So I think it's a good idea, and I think it's on a good path. So thank you.
And also in the longer term, Richard spoke about how this spreadsheet will help their customer service. But I think in the longer term, if we can move some of the customer service away from planning to some degree, maybe not all of it, but it would be helpful if the planners can plan and somebody else could do customer service.
There you go. Perfect world. Christina, you had something you wanted to add? No? Okay, sorry.
I just wondered if we were going to get an opportunity to see the list. We
We
saw the template, but we didn't see the actual list.
Yeah, I just think it wasn't done in time to get it to your meeting today, but I would assume, I was going to ask at the end, I would assume for our next meeting, we can all get a copy of that, even as a sample, just to sort of see how it's all been put together and how we're progressing and sort of what the plan is. So I think we can get that out before the next meeting, so we can have a discussion about it at the next meeting. Was that your thought, Bjorn?
Yes, it was that we should definitely distribute it, and we know we need to go further, and we should go further in some areas, but I don't want to rush forward. I think that we might be smarter just to try to get this spreadsheet as complete as possible, see how it's working, what is working, what isn't working, before we get too ambitious with the next step. But I do believe we need to do more than just this in the long run.
Okay, no, that sounds good. So let's target that for the next meeting. Any questions for anybody who's talked about the spreadsheet or the concierge proposal? Any questions from anyone? Pat, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, it was just a comment. I think it's a great, good work done to this point. I just think that the only I could see sometimes a bit of a challenge coming when all the councillors have the information and all of a sudden they think their projects, individual councillors think their project should be the priority. And I think it's great for us all to have it, but I think it may be awkward sometimes for staff or they may get some undue pressure to get on a priority list. But just
our counselors are in perfect sync with staff. Don't you know that never happens? Never try to pull rank and get one of our projects put ahead. Richard would put us in our place the minute we tried that. So I'm not worried about that at all. Yeah, everybody's smiling. That's good. Yeah. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Any final wrap-up thoughts, Bjorn? Thank you for that.
No, not really. Just thank you, Richard. Thank you, Rebecca, for all the work you've done with this.
Okay. Thanks, folks. Appreciate everybody working toward that. I think that's really important. So let's go down to business recovery 9.1, which is the round table discussion on past presentations and future direction. So what I want to get some input from everybody, and I've got y'all on a list here, so everybody's going to speak. So there's no hiding today. But what I want to, based on last week's presentation where we had a background from Rebecca on, basically what the Kawartha Lakes economy is. And then we had a presentation from Tom on, as we recover, our economic recovery will be different than pre-pandemic. And we don't really know how it's going to be different, but I think we have to keep that in mind as we move forward. So what I'm really looking for is just from a task force perspective, I want to put a presentation together with some recommendations for the October 6th Committee of the Whole. And I'm really targeting November 3rd Committee of the Whole to have some final recommendations from this task force, sort of our final plan moving forward. But I think that plan needs to entail, short-term and long-term goals or objectives or as part of that plan. What does this task force feel we can do in the immediate concern and options maybe for 2021, with budget coming up in the fall? And which businesses, which areas, which industries do we need to target? And then I think the other side of that is, the long-term growth and prosperity or recovery. What sort of direction do we look at for the long term, and what kind of recommendations can we make? And some of those we've already done. I mean, the DC exemptions we have in place for industrial growth, for up to 25,000 square feet on commercial. I mean, that's a big incentive for people to grow their business. We've approved from a planning committee perspective thousands of residential units over the last year. So it's not like we've got approval on a cell gap project to increase the cell gap coverage across Eastern Ontario. That's in the works right now. That tender's out with private providers. That's over a $200 million project. So it's not like we don't have any long-term plans in place, but from a task force perspective, what do we need to, look at? So I'm just wondering, what I want to do is I want to go through as per our agenda. I'm just going to go down the list. And if you can come forward, whatever your ideas are for the short term, and maybe touch on, your thoughts for the long-term recovery. And then Rebecca and I will work on a bit of a summary and a long-term plan, and we'll bring that forward with some recommendations for the next task force meeting. So, does that make sense? Okay. So I'm going to start. Sorry, Pat. I'm going to start with you, Councillor O'Reilly. So you with the beautiful picture in the background, and I'm just going to go down the list as it's listed on our agenda here. But Pat, why don't you give us your thoughts first? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Andy, and the committee. You've touched on a couple of things. I said last week we had a really good conversation about construction and infrastructure. By that we met our downtowns, and I think coming forward to the committee of the whole meeting, we're talking about the Fenelon Falls and Lindsay being a priority at this time for economic recovery, and that was very important. And I think Tom spoke to that as well too. The other second one, which there's already some incentives as you've talked about with the planning and the DCs, which I think our bylaw is good till 220 till 22, I believe it is the one we passed. So I mean, they're still in place for people that still. I was talking to the people at the Days Inn on the weekend, and they were wondering, they're thinking about doing phase 2, building the new hotel. So I advised them that, to the best of my knowledge, that's still in play till 220 till 22. So anyways, around the connectivity, you're more familiar with that than I, Andy. We talked about the high speed and the broadband, increasing our capacity. And as we had a discussion earlier today, that it really is a priority. Maybe we have to invest locally ourselves as a municipality over and above or separately from the bigger broadband. And you're more familiar with that as being on the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus. Last week, I think we kind of dropped the ball with going to the committee of the whole, because we had a really good discussion around trails and boat launches, and also about the garbage and pickup of enhancing our downtowns and our parks. And I think that we probably should have had that as a recommendation as well, going to the committee of the whole meeting as well. I think it's we can have that discussion because we still have time, but I think it could have been one that would have gone forward. I talked to Tom yesterday about the apprenticeship program, which I brought up last week. And I think that's more, maybe Tom will speak to that when you talk to him. That involves the Minister of Labor. And I know that we've talked about maybe an potential agricultural course and apprentice programs in Lindsay in conjunction with Sir Sanford Fleming. And Tom is, he may, perhaps you'll speak to that for a moment when we discuss that with him, because I think there's great potential with our college here, and that may be more of a long-term project than a short-term program. I think the other thing that we haven't talked a lot about is when we're going to get back to work with these projects is what condition our workforce is in. You know, we got the COVID-19, if there's a second wave, you know, if there, you know, do we have enough PPEs? What's the condition of our workforce around mental health issues? Childcare as well. For some people, that sometimes somebody has to stay home, or whether it be the mother or the father, if there isn't adequate childcare or it's too expensive. And I think the other part that we really haven't discussed is where do the nonprofits fit into all this as well. So that's kind of just a general conversation about the workforce. And I think the other thing that should be mentioned that we probably should have an ace in the hole, or do have an ace in the hole. We have the Minister of Infrastructure as our member of Parliament. So maybe perhaps we can lean on Laurie if we have some good projects and going forward. So those are my comments around short and long term.
Great, thanks, Pat. Andrew Vail's not here, so we'll shoot right over to Councillor Seymour Fagan. Kathleen, welcome.
Hi.
Maybe
So
if you don't mind, just break it down into your thoughts for the short term and then the long term, so we sort of have an idea of both.
So short term, again, with the downtowns, I know that we're going to look at Fenland Falls and Lindsay, but I think we have to, I won't be at council this afternoon, but if you could put something in about the maintenance of the downtowns. Bob Cajun was done a few years ago, and we're having issues with the sidewalks and the weeds and all of those things. So if we can put something in discussing the maintenance of the downtowns, because that's why people are coming. I see it every day. People come into the villages and they're like, this is beautiful. I don't know if some way, somehow we can work with the Trent Severn to figure out how we can get people out on the water. That is a big thing. People come here, they want to get out in the water, but they can't. So like there's no tour boats, there's nothing like that. Jill probably can talk to more about that, but this is what they want to come and they can't. We don't have enough even kayak and boat rentals. As Jill know, everything is full. Everybody is busy. People are spending a lot of money in Ontario this year on long-term things like boats and cottages. Cottage rentals are also full. So I think maintaining the downtowns, making it accessible, making our tourism's doing a great job in getting people up here. I think just like when we do the park, that we have the wayfinding signs, that we have the docking available, that we have signage for it. All of those things, because people don't know, they're constantly asking me, you know, how to find things and what to do. So, you know, I think working with the downtown groups, but maintenance is, I think, is key, absolutely, to the, you know, to keeping people wanting to come to the area. Also, Tom mentioned something about small business and how they don't have time or the connections to get the right people together, and about some type of an incubator, which I do know that we have, but that's for tech. But looking into, this is more long-term, looking into it for regular business, because they don't have the time. They don't have the time to go out and find an actual qualified, proper accountant that knows what they're doing. We are all struggling with finding people. Same with the marketing, all of that. If there was somewhere we could go to get reputable people, and you know, this might be a private entity, but I know some municipalities do this. Innisfil is one of them. They're very aggressive on their economic development, and they're all over social media as well with their economic development. So yeah, that's really it. I also know some municipalities, including Oakville, have just bought marinas. So that's what they're investing in, and golf courses. So because they know people are looking at staying here. I'm just trying to think. I think that's it at this point right now.
Great, thank you. Good comments. And I like the maintenance of the downtowns. It's one thing to fix our downtowns, but we got to keep them up. I agree 100%.
Oh, yeah.
So thanks for that. So, okay, I'm going to turn it over. Bjorn, you're next. Short term, long term, any thoughts, ideas, sir?
No, I don't have many ideas. I think that we can't emphasize enough the value of rural internet and the cell gap. I heard somewhere, I'm not sure if it's true, but that Halliburton school system has 400 more kids this year because a lot of people who have homes up here and in Toronto decided to stay up and send their kids to school up here. Like I said, I don't know if that's true, but I think if people are going to stay up here and work from home, they do need the internet. So I still think that and the cell gaps are the two things that are the most important. As far as any other projects, I don't know enough to speak, but I think that it will be important to be first out of the gate. We were one of the first municipalities to welcome cottage owners back to their places and say they were welcome here. I think if we stay in close contact with the provincial and federal counterparts, we can maybe have a better shot at their programs, but also find out what they're thinking in terms of opening up, because the restrictions are provincial or federal in nature, and that doesn't matter what we do, we can't go against them. So that's my only thoughts.
Great, thanks, Bjorn. Tom, you're next. Everybody's using your ideas ahead of time, but I'm sure they left. Go ahead.
Well, again, I'm going to speak in more general terms, not about specific projects mostly, but my general approach would be we need money into the economy now, and that comes from wages and salaries and the materials that are required to do the work. So in the short term, there need to be projects that are related to hiring people and getting that money into the economy. But it can't be just make work projects. And as you say, even the cleanup of the downtown, once you do the cleanup, it needs to be maintained. So that is the intent, that you get it to a point where you know how to manage it and do it economically into the future. So there has to be a legacy component to the current activities. So you're trying to stimulate the economy with activity in, let's say, the work being done downtown, whether it's capital projects or let's say beautification side. And then, but the intent is to have a legacy from that will be a foundation for future growth. So that's, it can't just be, let's do a one-off project because we need to get money into the economy. You need to have projects that are related to the future direction you need to take. And I think the strategic plan is a good measure of what needs to be done in terms of where those legacies need to be. So you need to attract more people. Ideally, you get the community to be younger, higher incomes, higher levels of education. You get, to Councillor O'Reilly's point, we need to look at the labor market and what the needs are. And if there are skills that are needed, then we should be looking at the opportunity for the college to be able to work with the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development, not the Ministry of Colleges and Universities, for Skills Advance Ontario programs that are like apprenticeship programs that address current labor market needs. So that needs to have, we need an assessment of what are the labor market needs into the future. Let's find ways to train people, upskill, change careers, whatever needs to be done. And the college is ideally positioned to be able to do that. So that takes time. You have to be a training delivery agent approved. You have to submit the proposal, and they are well funded. So if it required property to be able to deliver, it could be done through leasing some facilities, not necessarily on the campus itself. In Peterborough, we're doing that at the Peterborough Airport for some programs. So I think it's a matter of focusing on what needs to be done for the future, what the labor market needs are going to be. Take advantage of the things you've already got approved and get moving on them to provide some income and demand in the community to stimulate it. And then when it's done, you have the platform upon which to move forward in the long-term direction, at the strategic directions. One other point about what I call social platforms, this idea where small businesses, not-for-profits, whatever, who have a difficult time really coping with anything more than their day-to-day activities, to centralize something like that. I don't really, an incubator isn't what it is. It's an opportunity to have bookkeeping, communications, IT, HR, all of that with people with expertise in it, where they would support small business, not-for-profits and charities. There's quite a bit of work being done on that related to rural communities out of University of Guelph. And actually a former student of mine who did her master's degree at Trent is working on her PhD in that very field. Katie Allen is her name. And she is at her kind of dissertation phase. She's through her coursework and qualifying exams. So very interesting ideas around how to create these social platforms to support the small organizations that are so vital to for a small community to thrive. I think it would be a great opportunity to take that on. And that would be laying a foundation for future development as well. Okay. So it's a separation between immediate needs, but they have to be tied to legacies that will support future development.
Perfect, thank you. I was gonna say, was that all? Is that all? Thanks, Bob. Looks like we got our work cut out for us. Thanks for that, appreciate it. Jill, you're next. Any thoughts for us?
Yeah, so my biggest thing that I would be thinking about right now is just bracing for that phase 2 and the second wave. We've had a pretty successful summer where we've welcomed a lot of people into our area. So what does the fall and winter look like as we kind of lose that the fair weather guests that are happy to be outside when the sun shines, but not so much when it's snowing or rainy or miserable out. The downtown revitalization and seeing some sort of synergy between real life and virtual life. So, our downtown cores that are vibrant in the summertime, how do we keep them looking vibrant and appealing in the wintertime? So maybe having a campaign where we have a tech approach where there's a virtual mall for keeping people coming virtually over the course of the winter, or having more ability for people to be doing things outside, where there's, comfort stations, which we know there's a gap in. And as the locks close for the season, where do people who visit us in the wintertime, where do they go other than restaurants? Because if the second phase comes as predicted, then there's going to be some challenges there. There's a tendency to want to quantify our day trippers and our ghost visitors that travel through our area, and to make them have more economic, to kind of recognize their economic footprint. And I think that a campaign where we know there's a lot more people working from home, there's a lot more businesses across the province, across the world that have flexed their work environment out of necessity. But how do we capitalize on that? How do we have more people coming into City of Kawartha Lakes to live and do business because they now have that opportunity? So we've kind of had a captive audience this year when it comes to tourism because people can't travel. So how do you change the narrative so that people don't feel that they're captive and trapped and have to come here? How do you feel like this? How do you make people feel like this is a better choice to choose Kawartha Lakes, to choose to live, work, and play here? And then to Kathleen's point about getting people on the water, if we had 100 boats, we could have rented them. We had a wait list of over 500 people, and we're by far well in advance for our bookings for next year. So we know that people across the province are already anticipating that they're going to be in the same situation next year where they can't travel. So then it's for the businesses that are putting people on the water, or the businesses that are you know, the hospitable ones. How do you find that balance between the economics and the business of it and the balance of the environment, and not putting 100 boats on the water, or putting 100 boats on the water that are protecting the environment or working in a more sustainable environmental fashion than causing harm to the environment? Because there's a lot of residents in the area that are concerned about an increased demand on our area and on our resources. That's it.
Okay, that's great. I've kind of lost everybody's. Thanks, Jill. Everybody's frozen on my screen. Is anybody else having similar issues? I don't know who the host is, but everybody's, I think everybody, can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
You can hear me okay? I've got, everybody's face is frozen, except Councillor O'Reilly's, unfortunately, but
Can't do about that.
we're good. Okay, well, I'll just keep going then. We don't need to, what we need to do is hear from you, and that seems to be working. Thanks, Jill. That's some great feedback. Mark Wilson, are you still with us, Mark?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, can you hear me there, Andy? Yeah, well, I think I won't repeat the internet thing, but with 4 kids at home, one trying to study at university remotely, obviously, and living in the country, obviously, I'll just say it again, whatever improvements we can see for our rural internet service, I think is very important. I think the only thing I'd like to bring up is just, I think that Tom mentioned last year or last presentation, something that stuck with me was housing for, I think he referred to it, and Tom, you can tell me if this is wrong, mid-career families or people that professionals. And I think that's something where we've got a real opportunity right now to try to attract that demographic. Historically, I think we've been described as a retirement town, and I think the migration from the urban areas is going to continue. And I think if we can, anything we can do to be that preferred location to relocate is I think it would be really beneficial for the long term. And I think to do that, obviously we need to have one of these major developments, I guess the craft development probably being the major one, get started so that we can have a place for these people to live. I think there's a real opportunity there looking to move, and there's obviously lots of opportunity to work remotely. It's been proven. So if we can be the first out of the gate and have that housing for those folks, I think there's a real opportunity for us.
Okay, thanks, Mark. We do have a nice mix of housing coming forward. We just need to get them digging some holes in the ground and get them going. And I think we'll hear some. I know Craft is moving forward quite rapidly, and we should hear something back from them fairly shortly on their proposal. So I know they've got a lot of houses sold so far just because of the price point, and looking to change their model a little bit to build even more. So I think you're right. The demand is there. We just need to get it going, and then we can be in good shape for people.
And I think that will, obviously that's going to feed the downtown when it gets improved. It's going to be a destination for those folks, and it's going to be really positive economic impact on the community.
No, agree. Thank you for that. Chris Marshall's not here, but Richard, you've been listening. Do you have anything you want to add sitting in for Chris at this point?
Sure. Lots of great discussion about different priorities. I think from our perspective, obviously, getting a lot of these priority projects moving over the next few months and over the coming years. I think we're sort of at a cusp right now where we're seeing a lot of big developments coming through on some large land chunks. So we've got Craft, they've come through for their first part. They're considering a second part. So sitting down with them, looking at the iBrands proposal at the north end of Jennings Creek neighborhood, which is another couple thousand units. And then sort of kickstarting the RC group as well. So trying to get as much of the coverage in the Jennings Creek area as possible. I think that's our large area. So if we can get that built out as soon as possible, that would be great. Also, a lot of intensification projects, and those are the projects that are a little trickier because they take a little bit more time. But I think we're going to see a lot more of those density projects. So getting on top of those is important. I think one of the things that the whole COVID thing has taught us is that we don't have as much of an online presence as I think we need. And so we're working with Brenda Stonehouse on that. Lots of questions, frequently asked questions, getting our documents in accessible format so they can all go on the website. We get that comment a lot, so we're working on that. In the longer term, I hate to beat the cell coverage thing again, but it is really important. It's interesting because having worked at home, I've never done that before to a large extent. So you use your work phone, and a lot of times if you're driving along and you're trying to call somebody, there's a lot of dead spots in the municipality. So I think that's really important for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's gonna help business. Second of all, it's going to help us with a work from home, attracting people that might want to work here, only commute in, maybe a couple of days or so, but then work from home for the other days. If we have really good, strong internet cell coverage in our community, I think it's really going to help us grow, especially our rural areas. I know Mark has made the comment as well, but I think it's really important, and it will certainly help us out in cottage country as well. So those are sort of my observations, both short and long term.
Great, thanks for that, Richard. And I assume while you're doing your calls in the car, you're using your hands-free mode, just for the record.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Good man. Okay. Didn't want anybody getting you in trouble there. So I thought I better clarify. Thanks for that. Okay. Juan, you're next. Any hiding in the shadows there, Juan? You got any thoughts for us?
Sure. Thank you, Andy. So just two sort of themes. One is, so we talked about investment in our infrastructure, and in particular the downtown. We do have a quite large, significant water pollution control plant expansion. I believe it closes this week. And that project alone is in the neighborhood of north of 20 million. So that is good for the economy. It's good for the municipality in terms of capacity at our water pollution control plant. There will be a council report coming, I believe, in October, because it's not going to meet the September one. It might meet September. So either September or October to award that contract consultant. So the construction value alone is 20 or 22 million, plus contract and inspection, material testing, project management, all that stuff. So there's a quite significant investment that the city's going to make. I know we can't mandate that the labor force be local, but if it's anything like our construction this year, for example, both the Colburn Street and the Kent Street and Lindsay Street projects, even though those companies weren't, their headquarters weren't in Kawartha Lakes per se, they did hire a lot of local labor, local talent to facilitate those works. So that's very, very positive, keeping money in Kawartha Lakes into our workforce. The other theme I want to talk about is, it's been mentioned before, it's development. Not only craft, but there's a lot of other development projects that are actively selling houses. So they either have their M plan, their lots have been created, and they've sold houses. And the earliest, I think, is April or May, where they're going to deliver. So these greenfield properties are serviced. They haven't pulled building permits yet, but we're anticipating that they're going to be building over the fall and winter. in order to deliver the houses to the new residents in early spring. So that's very, very positive. We want to make sure we, through our planning department or building department, that we streamline those building permits. I think the last time I talked to the one developer, he had about 75 houses sold, and the majority of those houses came within the last 2-3 months during COVID. The other developer that is actively moving fill in order to service his lots, he's actively, he has about 100, under 100 lots there, but he is actively marketing and selling those as well. So whatever, and again, that's a win-win for everyone, right? The developer's happy. We get new residents, a new tax base into our economy. And again, they hire local for all the trades to build the houses, which funnels into the economy, and there's a lot of spin-offs of that. So I think those are two great positive stories that we should encourage as we go along.
Great, thanks Juan, I appreciate that. And you're right, and that ties in, I think, to Mark's comments about having places for young families to go and affordable, some kind of affordable housing mix. So I think there's a lot coming up the pipe, I agree. So I think we're just on the cusp of some pretty special things. Christina, I'm going to ask Christina, then I'll wrap up with Rebecca, but do you have anything you want to add, Christina?
I think everyone's covered everything that we have talked about. I think the concept of working with the community to encourage development, but also to facilitate where people might be getting caught up with stumbling blocks in the process. I think as long as we can continue to do some of that facilitation, that would greatly improve the not only the development community but also assist with our existing residents who are actually actively using our internet services, our email services, our case services, et cetera, to get their message out as well. So I think communication going forward will be really, really important to encourage that dynamic dialogue with not only our existing residents, but the new residents we're encouraging to come into our community so that everybody can understand what this growth and development means, what it looks like, and how it will actually stimulate the economy.
Thank you. Appreciate that. That's a good point. Communication with new residents. I like that. Thank you. Rebecca, do you have any thoughts? And I wanted to sort of put you a little bit on the spot, go figure, eh? I mean, some of these ideas, and I mean, when we do our final wrap-up report, I think it's important, and Tom touched on it, but it's important to take, these recommendations or ideas from the task force, and, we need to merge those with some of our strategic plans moving forward and, how they sort of tie in together. So I just wonder if you can comment on that, or if you have any thoughts on the short-term, long-term from a wrap-up point of view. Go ahead.
When we hear these comments and we look at the corporate strategic plan that council put together and the economic development strategy, there's a couple of other more in-depth strategies that are either in development or council's looked at, like agriculture and food. Destination development plan is in process, the cultural master plan. I think that these comments and what the pandemic has highlighted for us, like in particular, people relocating out of the city, the option for working from home, highlighting things that we know that we need in this community. I think Tom really hit the nail on the head with, we need a younger demographic. We need people with higher education and higher incomes. And either we bring people in that have those attributes, or ideally we do both and we support the existing community to be able to achieve those things. The existing plans and strategies that we have in place actually speak to a lot of these, and these probably refine and put particular emphasis on parts of those strategies that have a lot of thought into them already, to highlight particular areas of them and focus on them. So I think when we pull our plans together for this task force, it'll be dovetailing the two of them and pulling out from what we've got, the direction that we were wanting to go and where we actually need to focus a little bit more because of what the pandemic presents to us. And just one other thought, in agreement with what everybody said, the majority of our businesses, and and employment growth actually comes from the expansion of our existing business community. So to Councillor Seymour Fagan's point around maintenance is really important, and the ongoing programming piece. There's a really important programming piece around how we support business development in the community, how we support the activation of public space. I think we as a municipality have the opportunity to put infrastructure in place, hard infrastructure in place, but there's also a great role in soft infrastructure, whether it's programming, capacity development of organizations, whatever it is, all those things that make life great and people want to live up here and maneuver through the system and live a great life.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I didn't know you were finished there. You're on a roll. I was mesmerized listening to you, and you just stopped. So,
I thought I better stop before I keep talking.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Riley.
Yeah, just maybe through to you, Rebecca. We talked a little bit about earlier, and Tom touched on it about identifying our workforce, identifying the gaps. Is that a project that should, that's something your department can do, or is it individuals that we should contract to come into our community and discuss what our labor force really is and what the shortfalls are? And I know Tom mentioned Katie Allen, but I don't think that was directly what she does. I could stand to be corrected on that.
Yes, we have a pretty good handle on skills gaps in the community through our Workforce Development Board and the research that they do. And we also are very aware of skills gaps in manufacturing and agricultural industries. And we have been funded for a Skills Advance Ontario program for those two sectors. It's going to kick off in the next couple of weeks. So it's actually perfect timing. There's a little bit of, we approved for this project right as the pandemic hit. And so there's a lot of work that needs to happen now to figure out what's changed in the skills gaps in agriculture and manufacturing in our community and how we address the needs of those two industries so that they can keep growing.
Thank you.
Okay, so thanks everybody for your comments. I've made some notes, and I know we'll have it in the minutes, and we've got a recording, so Rebecca and I will work on pulling a bit of a summary together for the next meeting and have a rough outline of where we're going to go. Yes, I'll help you, Rebecca, don't worry. I won't put it all on you, but I really appreciate everybody's feedback. Those are some great comments, and exactly why we put a task force together to get as much feedback from different areas in our community as possible. So thank you. Any final comments on that before we move on to our working group feedback? Anybody? Nothing? Okay. Thank you for that. We'll go down to 9.2, which is round 2 of working group meetings. I know Rebecca's looking for some feedback on touching base with some or all of the working groups. Maybe to tie into some of the comments we've made here today or some of the feedback. And I think she's just looking, I'm going to turn it over to her, but I think she's just looking for some thoughts or feedback from the committee on how we should reach out to that. Should we go? I'll turn it over to Rebecca. Go ahead.
So you as a task force have established working groups to get input directly from your business community. So back in June, we ran 10 different working groups with all different sectors. Bjorn, I think you sat in on every single one of them. And they all identified what, at that point in time, what they were facing, what would be helpful for them as in that current season. And in June, we're in a really different spot to where we are in stage 3 in September. So my question out to this group is, you had said, yes, you'd like to hear from them every 2 months. What do you want to hear from them? What information would be helpful to you as a task force in the decisions that you're making? And we will set these working groups up to get you the information that you need. So perhaps we could have a bit of a discussion as a group, if that would be okay.
That would be wonderful. Does anybody have any initial thoughts on what do you want? What further information would you like to hear out of the working groups? Maybe touch on, do you think we need to touch base with all the working groups? Do you think we can go back to, where is the biggest struggle in our economy? And maybe those are the working groups we should focus on moving forward. So just, Rebecca's looking for some direction if anybody has any thoughts. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I was really impressed by the conversation in the innovation working group, that there was this appetite that I think is reflective of the conversation we've had today for a change in the way that things are done, and that promoting a new wave of growth for the future. So there was a topic that came up there at the end of that conversation about diversity and inclusion, which to me is diversity that leads to inclusion. I think that needs to be something that needs to be considered, given the wave of new people that will come to the community. I think that needs to be done. But I think we need to build on this momentum of a willingness to change how we do things, what I call social institutions, the processes, whether it's business or education or government. We need to look at new ways to do things to be able to, when the broadband takes off, it's not just going to be using technology with the same old systems. We need different systems and different approaches to what we do. So I'd like to see innovation continue to have conversations about what those issues are, because I think we can build on the momentum so far.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thoughts on working groups? Jill, go ahead.
Just with regards to tourism, I think it's important to circle back and find out, how everyone's summer went and what they're anticipating for the fall and the winter. And it would be, I think, of great benefit to do some sharing with regards to, what worked for people this summer, how people are getting ready for next summer, what's the capacity looking like for next summer. So I think hearing from our businesses in tourism would be very important. And then too, laying the groundwork for what happens in the wintertime. Like, you couldn't buy a boat this year. Is that going to hold true for snowmobiles and our trail system?
Yeah, great comments. I'm wondering if, as part of tourism, Rebecca, you could maybe combine that with a few of the other ones, rather than doing them all individually, but maybe loop in, just to get feedback on what worked and what didn't work. Maybe loop in the restaurants and some of the small businesses and just sort of have maybe a bigger conversation, but instead of doing them all individually. I think tourism covers a lot of some of those other areas. So that might be taking on Jill's point and just expanding it a little bit as far as one big conversation. What do you think?
Yeah, we were wondering about if tourism, we had combining a couple of groups, tourism, retail, culture, restaurants potentially. Restaurants we're a little bit curious about because they have some pretty unique challenges for them, but they're all together as a group. And the benefit of having different groups together when you're sharing ideas is you can cross-pollinate those ideas, things that you're not thinking about when you're right in your box, in your little world.
Well, and I agree. And I think it's important to let the group know as well that we as a municipality, when we talk tourism, we can focus on marketing and getting people to come to our community. At the end of the day, it's up to individual businesses, whether they're a restaurant or a gift shop, to get people to enter their business. I mean, we can't force a customer to go into a certain store. We can we can promote the community and what we have to offer. But at the end of the day, it's the business that has to do their thing as a business and do their marketing and their promotion and offer their customer service to get people to come in their door and to come back, not just to come in once, but to want to come back because they've had a good experience. So I don't think we should be afraid to push back a little bit on some of the businesses as well to say, we might be able to help, and this is maybe more for next year, but deliver, those people to our community, which I think a lot of people came up this year. But for some businesses that are still struggling, what can they do differently to get people to actually attend, you know, whether it's a restaurant or whether it's a store in that regard. So sometimes can be a touchy conversation, but I think it's, you know, it's part of that, right? We don't, you know, Jill has houseboat business, but we don't force people to go rent or borrow, I guess, not borrow, sorry, Jill, or steal a houseboat. But at the end of the day, it's her promoting, you know, it's an individual promoting their business to come and do that, and whether they want to come to Kawartha Lakes. We can look at the big picture, but I think it's important to put some of that onus, you know, how do they piggyback along with what we're trying to do to get somebody to visit their individual business, and more importantly, to come back again and again and again because they've had a great experience. So just my thoughts. Bjorn, you had something you wanted to add?
I did, and don't know if it was you or Rebecca that stole my idea of putting a couple of groups together, but I sat in on all 10 meetings, and some of them were seemed like a bit of a waste of time, to tell you the truth. But the situation is so different now, and we did say we wanted to hear back from the people we talked to. I think it would be a good idea to invite them back to meetings, but have a fewer of them. Because the feedback we got 2 or 3 months ago is useless now because the situation is so different. A lot of retailers were worried about the season, and the way it played out was that they had the best season ever. And now, of course, they have to figure out if they're going to plan for an equally good next year or a worse one. But I think the feedback from back then is not worth a lot at this point. But I do think we should invite some input from the public and have maybe 3 or 4 meetings instead of 10.
Yeah, no, and I agree wholeheartedly with that, Rebecca. I think it is different, and you know, if people are planning staycations, like Jill says, for next year, and they want to do things locally, which it looks like they are, they're buying their toys, their ATVs, and their snowmobiles, and their Sea-Doos, which nobody can find anymore. So you know, this isn't a temporary one season wonder thing. So you know, having that discussion with some of these groups and how do we plan for that. But somehow I would really like to loop in the downtown groups again, whether it's with one of the other groups or not. But I think with a lot of our short-term discussion that we've had and the importance of our downtown infrastructure and moving forward, then, you know, I would really like to sort of bore down with some of the downtown folk and just dive right in there and sort of, you know, what could we do to help, you know, in our downtowns for next year, recognizing that those are our core communities. And goes back to my previous point about people visited our downtown. How do we get them to come back? And then the different businesses can obviously piggyback on that. Those are my thoughts. Kathleen, you had something you wanted to add?
So I think one thing that we have to bring in if we're going to talk about tourism in the downtowns and all that, the biggest challenge is, anybody who has a business here will tell you, is what Tom was referring to was employment, but we don't have anybody who wants to work. That is huge. It's a huge problem. And when we do I've had 3 people sent to me from VCCS, and they were unemployable. You know, I tried, and there was just no way. So we have to figure it out. I don't know if it's somehow engaging people in high schools or what we're going to do to get people to start working up here. People just don't want to work, and CERB did not help it at all. And you'll hear that, and I'm sure everybody's heard that from other employers. But you know, we could have done with 35 employees. We have 29, but that's when your customer service drops, because you don't have the employees. Then people start complaining, and you're doing the best you can. All these businesses just want to do the best they can, but if we do not have the people to work, that is what makes it difficult. So if we can somehow maybe pull in, I don't know, one of the agencies or the college or somebody into one of these meetings in regards to getting people to work up here would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. You know, and I think when we talk about a great place to work and not work, but play and visit as a community, maybe that's part of it, where, you know, people want to come up and play and visit, but they don't necessarily want to come up and work. And, you know, but maybe the other side of that is, you know, do you blame them? Maybe the other side of that is, you know, if they're going to come up here and they're going to stay longer and spend more time in the rural area, then, you know, those part-time jobs to make a few bucks look more attractive. I know my younger days, I lived in Florida for 3 years and I worked down there on a work permit. Yes, I was legal. And, you know, it was the same conversation. It was everybody was going to the beach in the day and I was going to work. And it wasn't as fun being in Florida, you know, to work as it was when you're down there on vacation. So, you know, maybe that's part of the challenge up here we don't think about is, you know, why don't more people want to work? Well, it's such a fun place to hang out and play that somehow we need to get that message out that you can earn a few bucks and have more fun playing, you know, and sort of have that mix of both. So thanks. Those are good comments. I appreciate that. Councillor O'Reilly, you had something?
Yeah, just a brief, I think we've had lots of conversation about short term and they're all great ideas and legitimate and we're going to work on them. I just think we also have an opportunity to look at our legacy in the long term. And I don't want that to be missed because I think that our long-term projects are certainly and emphasize what our potential legacy could be. So I think that should also be a piece of it.
Yeah, and that's probably a great point, Rebecca. Well, it is a great point. You know, when we're talking with these task forces or with these working groups, let's put that question out to them as well. It's not just about what works for tomorrow. It's about, you know, what do you see happening over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road? And maybe we can expand that thought process, you know, out to the working groups rather than just what can we do for you tomorrow? You know, what are you going to need in the next few years? So maybe it's a bit of a two-part conversation like we had here today. So that's a good point, Councillor O'Reilly. Thank you. Any other, does that give you what you need, Rebecca? Does that give you some feedback or are you still looking for more information?
This has been helpful. So we will we'll tidy up the number of working groups so there'll be less working groups. And we'll focus the conversations around what's going on now, what are you seeing for next year? And we can flesh them out to your point, Councillor Seymour-Fagan, to talk about employment and bring in some resources that might be able to spur that conversation. I'll have a think about that. And then also bring in that what's going on 2 to 5 years to think about that legacy piece and get their input so that for the next working group meeting you have, the next task force meeting you have as a group to come back together, we'll be able to feed in your ideas back to you as well as the input from the working groups to kind of flesh out that discussion. And hopefully all of you are able to participate in one or more of these working groups to listen into the discussion because there's been some pretty rich discussion in some of them.
Yeah, and I think we should participate as much as possible. I mean, obviously not everybody can do every meeting, but maybe what would help a lot from my perspective, I won't speak for the rest of the group, but if you could register for these meetings, everybody on the task force, and then, you know, we don't have to go through that process to register. And then maybe we see the time we can pop in for 15 minutes or half an hour if time allows, maybe not for the whole meeting, but if everybody on the group is registered, then I think that makes that process a little easier. Would that work?
That'd be great. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Any final comments on the working groups? So, yeah, go ahead.
Maybe just one on timing. I think we'll be aiming for the week of the 14th of September.
Yeah, I would like to do the next meeting at September 22nd, and that's going to put a little bit of a push on, you know, getting feedback and rounding things up. But to meet that October 6th committee of the whole and to keep this moving forward, I do want to have that next meeting on September 22nd, 3 weeks from now. So if we can feed them in, if you can make that work again, I know that's tight, but hopefully after Labor Day, everybody's schedule gets a little bit with the kids off to school and a little bit more, hopefully off to school, staying in school, hopefully, but we'll see what happens, but one step at a time. Okay, so that's good. Thank you for that. And I just want to loop back real quick. And one thing I wanted to mention, one of the comments that keeps coming up is the broadband, probably back to our previous conversation. So we've, you know, and Pat mentioned it, Pat O'Reilly mentioned it in his comments, but we have, you know, through, you know, the process through EORN, the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus, the Eastern Ontario Regional Network has a proposal in front of the provincial and federal government and the ministers regarding a gig to the home, and their proposal is a $1.5 billion proposal for Eastern Ontario, and it involves wire to 95% of the homes in Eastern Ontario, not just homes, but businesses as well, cottages and everything else. There is going to be 5%. They're not going to get to with wire, but there'll be, you know, other options to wire to a tower that then, you know, gets out to the extra 5% that for whatever reason, remoteness. But this is a big proposal from the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus. And I guess what, you know, the need for broadband, and we talk about it in Eastern Ontario, but we talk about it in our community, and, you know, we need it regardless. So I want to, does this committee support, you know, we're going to proceed. I'm the chair of Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus till the end of the year. The ORN thing is moving forward. We're getting good feedback from the different levels of government, but it's a ton of money. If that project, that's the way to go. I firmly believe that. But if that project doesn't go or falls by the wayside for whatever reason, I don't believe it will. Would this task force support the city of Kawartha Lakes working with the ORN, you know, on an individual basis to try to put a local solutions together for internet? So rather than just saying we tried through Eastern Ontario, we couldn't make it work, saying that, you know what, that's the most economical way to do this. But if that doesn't work, should we look at, you know, a local solution? And how do we get, you know, whether it's wire or 1 gig or whatever you want to call it, to 95% of our residents and businesses in Kawartha Lakes? Because from what I'm hearing and from what, you know, you folks are telling me and what I'm hearing everywhere else, there's nothing more important than what we can do for economic development, for education, for people who want to live here, work here, play here, than have a good, stable, you know, broadband connection for most people. And if we, to Mark's point, I think if we can take the lead in that, you know, that's going to put us a leg up. And there's going to be a cost to that. And I have no idea what it is, but we can cross that bridge when we get to it. But does the task force sort of, you know, would you support doing that on a local level if we can't do it from an Eastern Ontario? And I just want to see what your thoughts are on that. If anybody, Pat, go ahead.
Do you want a motion or resolution from this committee to explore the options going forward on that, Andy? Is that what you're looking forward to?
I don't know. Well, we can, Pat. I mean, that's certainly, we don't, I don't know if we're at that point yet. I think, you know, the best way to approach it, I really believe, is through the EORN, just from economies of scale, Eastern Ontario. But, you know, sometimes if these things go on for a year or 2 years, you know, and maybe simultaneously, we should be looking at a local solution sort of side by side, at least putting a plan together. So if the other one doesn't come to fruition, you know, then maybe we've sort of got our ducks in a row and we can proceed on our end. I just think it's too important to, again, to have all our eggs in one basket than to say, if that doesn't get going as soon as it should, what does that do for us? Nothing. So, you know, but yeah, so maybe a recommendation if to look at that as a local solution moving forward could be one of the recommendations going to council. If you want to make that motion, Councillor O'Reilly, there's no cost to it. It's just if you'll do that. Does anybody want to second that? And then we can round that conversation out. Councillor Seymour Fagan, you'll second that. Thank you. Does everybody agree? Does anybody not agree with just, I'll take that as a yes, we should pursue it. Okay. All right. That's all I want. So I'll consider that motion passed. I'll put that in my recommendations to the next committee of the whole as part of our working group and everything that comes forward. But I think I should have mentioned that back when we were having that discussion, but I forgot. So I think that's important because I don't think we can afford to drop that one way or the other. So, okay. So thank you for that. That's all I have. Our next meeting, we're going to set up for September 22nd at 10 o'clock, 3 weeks from today. Rebecca's going to reach out to the working groups and then she'll keep us posted on the schedule, get us registered so that we can jump in or out as we need to. Is there any final thoughts or comments from anyone on the group before we adjourn? Okay. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Appreciate it. That was a great discussion, giving us some good direction moving forward. Jen, go ahead.
I need a motion to adjourn. I've been told by the clerk's office.
Really? I can't just do that?
No.
They told me I was mayor. I could do whatever I wanted, but they lied again. So I need a motion to adjourn. Tom, will you move that?
Motion to adjourn.
As seconded by Jill. Thank you. Anyone opposed to adjourning? We'll consider the motion passed. And Jennifer's happy. Thanks, folks. We'll see you in a few weeks, and we'll hopefully see you on one of the working groups. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.